if you're still alive, we'll never have peace!
This can't be real!
Help me, my son! Go die!
Christmas Eve. Rain poured over the outskirts of the Badan as if the sky itself were weeping. Atakanal pushed open the rusted gate and stepped into the yard, his clothes soaked through, his breath ragged after a day of exhausting work. All he wanted was to get home early, to see his wife, to give his mother the wool scarf he had bought with the last of his wages. Then he heard the sound of splashing water behind the house. Not rain, struggling. Atakanal switched on his flashlight, and in that instant, his world collapsed. In the wavering beam of light, his wife was forcing his mother's head down into a thick pool of mud. The old woman's hands trembled as she clawed at the ground, clinging to life with her final strength. Her lips moved, her voice weak and broken beneath the rain. "Kunal, I'm so cold," Atakanal screamed. His name tore through the darkness, then vanished, swallowed by the storm. He charged forward, dragged his wife away with every ounce of strength he had left. His mother lay motionless in the mud, her gray hair matted with cold earth. Atakanal collapsed to his knees, cradling her trembling body, sobbing like a child. "Mama, I'm home. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But that Christmas, there was no miracle. And that moment taught him a cruel truth. There are mistakes that, if ignored for too long, must be paid for with an entire lifetime. That Christmas night, a son came home and lost his mother forever. This is Afritalis TK, where African family stories are not told for entertainment, but to remind us of the cost of silence and the value of a mother. If you're watching, stay with us until the very last second. Mama Funk was the strongest woman in that poor neighborhood of Ibadan, not because she raised her voice, not because she fought anyone, but because life knocked her down again, and again, and again. And she still stood up. In that place, strength did not live in words or appearances. Strength meant waking up before dawn, cold water on her face, cloth wrapped tight around her body, and stepping onto a muddy road, with a basin of bean paste balanced on her head, like a crown she never asked for. Mama Funk's hands were rough, cracked, forever carrying the smell of charcoal smoke, hot oil, and pepper. These were not soft hands. These were survival hands. Her husband died early. One day, he was still sitting on the porch, laughing, talking about tomorrow. The next day, he was gone, taken by an illness that did not care how much love you had, or how much hope you believed in one moment. Mama Funk became a widow, with a small boy, and a cold world ahead of her. But she refused to let life decide her fate. She went to the market, and she began again with akara. Every morning, beans ground until her arms burned, pepper crushed until her eyes stung, charcoal lit, oil heated, whispering back at her destiny. The sound of akara hitting hot oil became the rhythm of her life. She had no stall, no shade. She stood at the edge of the market, where the sun punished you, where rain soaked you, where people pretended not to see you. Some days, customers underpaid her. Some days, children knocked over everything she had. Some days, rain killed the fire and turned her corner into mud. But Mama Funk stayed. Because Kunal was growing. Because Kunal needed food. Because Kunal needed books. Because Kunal needed a future better than his mother's past. Her back bent early. Her knees never rested. Her hands grew so calloused. They barely felt pain anymore. Some nights she came home, sat on the floor for a long time, before she could stand again. But she never complained in front of her son. Kunal grew up watching more than speaking. He noticed how his mother paused before climbing stairs, how her hand pressed against her lower back when she thought he wasn't looking. He noticed her smile, gentle but tired. One day, he asked her, his voice still young but serious, "Are you tired, Mama?" Mama Funk stopped. Not because she had no answer, but because she did not want her pain to become a burden in her son's heart. She smiled. The kind of smile mothers wear like armor. "As long as I'm breathing," she said, "I can take care of you." Cunnel believed her. And Mama Funk believed it too. With everything she had left, years passed. Cunnel grew tall, strong. His voice deepened. He carried things for his mother, stood between her and rude customers, became the man she prayed for. Then one day, he came home with a name, Saad, a city girl, beautiful, educated. Mama Funk listened, asked gentle questions, nodded, but in her heart, a quiet fear passed through. The fear of poor mothers, standing before dreams too big for their hands. Still, Cunnel was happy. And for Mama Funk, that was everything. When wedding talks began, she understood. In Nigeria, a wedding is not just marriage. It is honor, reputation, a public judgment. Cunnel wanted a proper wedding. Saad's family expected the same. Mama Funk looked around her small room, the broken fan, the cracked basin, the worn slippers by the door, and she knew love was not enough, so she sacrificed. She sold the last piece of land her husband left behind, her only security, her only future. She sold it quietly, no complaints, no explanations. Because if Cunnel knew, he would never allow it. When he found out, his voice shook. "Mama, why?" She touched his face like she did when he was a child. "So you can start life with dignity," she whispered. "So you never bow your head to anyone, no dowry, no house, no wealth to show, only a mother who poured her whole life into her son." And kept pouring. On the wedding day, Cunnel and Saad stood together in bright clothes. Mama Funk stood behind the crowd. Her eyes shone, but she did not cry, because she was not thinking about what she lost. She was thinking about her son's future. And in that moment, she had nothing left, no money, no safety for old age, only faith, only an old mother, believing her son would be happy. Saad never tried to hide her contempt. From the very first days she stepped into the small house in Ibadan, she looked at Mama Funk the way one looks at a stain on a white dress they want to wear through life. No shouting, no crude insults, just a slight frown when Mama Funk walked past, a quick glance at the worn slippers by the door, the subtle way Saad leaned away whenever Mama Funk accidentally brushed her hand. That was enough to turn the air in the house cold. Mama Funk was a market woman. Unsophisticated, that was the word Saad used quietly in her mind. Old clothes, faded by sun, rain, and years of struggle. The scent of charcoal smoke clung to her hair, as if her entire life had been lived in fire and could never be washed away. Saad, on the other hand, was a city woman. Perfume light as air. Clothes always neat and pressed. A soft voice with an edge beneath it. She moved like someone who believed she belonged somewhere cleaner, finer, a place where a woman who sold akara at the market would never be invited. One evening, after Cunnel finished eating, Saad pulled him into a corner of the room. Her voice was low, barely louder than the ceiling fan. But Mama Funk, a woman who had spent her whole life listening to the smallest changes in people's breathing, heard every word. "My friends will laugh," Saad said, her lips curving into a smile without warmth. "If they see your mother living with us." Cunnel froze. Instinctively, he glanced toward his mother. Mama Funk was washing dishes, her hands deep in soapy water. She didn't turn around. She only slowed her movements for a single beat. One beat long enough for a mother's heart to understand she had just been pushed out of her son's world. Cunnel cleared his throat, as if trying to speak. But Saad continued, gentle and cold at the same time. "I'm not saying your mother is bad. But, you know how people talk. In Nigeria, people will talk can be more terrifying than a curse. It hangs over families like an invisible hammer, ready to crush honor, dignity, and every dream people struggle to keep clean." Cunnel swallowed hard. And Mama Funk, while washing the last pot, made a decision she never wanted to make, to leave the room before she was thrown out of it. That night, she folded her clothes into a small bundle. Not much because her life had never held much. An old scarf, a plastic bowl, a few coins. As she passed the living room, she stopped and looked at Connell, as if searching for the little boy who once clung to her legs, crying because he feared his mother would leave him. Connell looked at her, then looked away. Mama Funk did not blame him. She only exhaled softly, like a quiet sigh. And she walked to the back of the house, to the small shed once used for storage. It was raining. Rain pounded the metal roof like thousands of stones thrown at her life. The ground was cold and damp. Even the mat was wet. Still, Mama Funk lay down, curling her body inward, like an old woman trying to take up as little space as possible, so she wouldn't trouble anyone. She pulled the scarf over her chest, eyes wide open in the darkness. Each raindrop felt like it was falling straight into her heart. Inside the house, Saad closed the bedroom door. Click, a small sound. But to Mama Funk, it was the sound of a life being locked away. The next morning, she woke before dawn, as always. She lit her stove quietly in the corner of the shed. She made a kara. She stood at the market. She came home with legs heavy as stone. But from that day on, she was no longer the mother in the house. She became a shadow. Saad grew more irritated by the day. She complained about the smallest things. A basin left in the wrong place, the smell of cooking oil on Mama Funk's clothes, the sound of her coughing at night. One day, standing in the yard with her arms crossed, Saad said to Connell, her voice calm in a way that was frightening, "She's going to ruin our future." Connell stiffened. He looked at his wife, then toward the shed. Through the crack in the door, Mama Funk hovered, as if she were afraid even her existence was an offense. Connell opened his mouth, but no words came. He wanted to say, "That's my mother." He wanted to say, "She sold her land for this wedding." He wanted to say, "She gave me everything." But every sentence died in his throat. Fear of arguing with his wife, fear of judgment, fear of losing the life he was trying so hard to build. And so, he stayed silent. That silence was not peaceful. It was a bloodless knife, quietly cutting deep into a mother's heart and turning a son into an accomplice. Connell stood there, shoulders heavy, eyes averted, a man grown in age but not yet grown in courage. The silence of a son who did not have the strength to protect his own mother. Christmas night, Ibadan had no snow. Only rain, heavy rain, relentless rain, pounding against tin roofs like invisible fists beating through the darkness. The dirt road in front of the house had turned into thick black mud, the smell of rot rising, mixed with cooking smoke and wet garbage. The entire poor neighborhood sank into a cold that did not come from ice, but from loneliness. Connell came home late from overtime. He walked fast, his shirt soaked and clinging to his back. His hand gripped a small plastic bag tightly inside, where the gifts he had rushed to buy, a soft brown scarf for his mother, and a simple bracelet for Saad, nothing expensive. Just everything he could gather from a month of struggle and thin wages. In Connell's mind, he imagined a rare moment of peace. He would step inside. Saad would be surprised, maybe even smile just a little. Then he would go to the back and give the scarf to his mother, saying, "Don't be cold anymore." She would complain like she always did, and he would smile quietly. That was all he wanted. Just one Christmas night without sighs. But when he reached the gate, something was wrong. No light from the shed behind the house. No familiar soft cough. No clatter of pots. Only rain hitting the ground and an unsettling emptiness. Connell called softly, "Mom?" No answer. He walked around to the back. The shed door was half open. The damp mat was still there. His mother's plastic bowl sat neatly in the corner. But she wasn't there. Connell's throat went dry. He turned to call Saad, then he heard it. Splashes, not rain, not wind. Feet stomping hard into mud, struggling sounds. The sound of someone fighting against something, forcing them down. Connell froze. A cold rush ran down his spine. His heart slammed so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. Instinct pushed him forward, but fear pulled at his legs like mud swallowing his ankles. He switched on his flashlight. The unsteady beam swept across the backyard, past piles of old junk, past banana trees, then stopped, like a blade cutting straight into his eyes. And he saw it, Saad. Her face was no longer the face of the wife he once loved. It was stone cold, empty, like a room with no windows. Her hair was soaked, stuck to her forehead, but her eyes did not tremble. No fear, no hesitation, only ruthless resolve. Both of Saad's hands were forcing Mama Funk's head down into a thick pool of mud. The mud rose, covering half the old woman's face. Mama Funk's gray hair was soaked and smeared with filth like a burial cloth. Her hands trembled, clawing at the ground, thin fingers scraping desperately for life, like someone trying to hold onto the world one last time. Connell couldn't breathe. His mouth opened, no sound came out. In that instant, memories crashed into him like a storm, his mother breaking a kara for him as a child. Her back bent under the sun, her voice whispering, "As long as I breathe, I will take care of you." The land she sold for his wedding to Saad, all of it, being pushed into the mud. Saad turned her head and looked at Connell like he was someone who had arrived too late. And she said it, not screaming, not panicking, just a sentence, sharp and final. "She has to disappear. If we want peace." Connell snapped awake like someone slapped across the face. "Saad," his voice shattered in the rain. He lunged forward. His shoes slipped in the mud. He nearly fell, but he didn't stop. He grabbed his wife's shoulder and yanked her back. Saad fought him, spinning like a cornered animal. Her nails clawed at his arms. But Connell, for the first time in months, was no longer weak. He shouted, his voice raw, "What are you doing?" "That's my mother." Saad panted, eyes wild, then spat words that froze Connell where he stood. "You want her alive? So she can destroy our lives?" Connell had no answer, because his silence all this time had paved the way to this moment. He spun around and dropped to his knees beside the mud. Mama." Mama Funk lay motionless. No struggle, no breath, only rain falling on her face, mud smeared through her gray hair. Her eyes were half closed, as if she were only sleeping, a cold, endless sleep. Connell wiped the mud from her face with his bare hands, frantic like a terrified child. He lifted her head, pressed his ear to her chest, as if sheer desperation could call life back. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." His sobs broke loose, shattered, swallowed by the rain. He clutched her tightly, crying like a lost child in a crowded market, like a son who finally understood that some things, once lost, can never be bought back, never fixed, never apologized away. In his hands the gift bag slipped into the mud. The soft wool scarf, meant for his mother, soaked through, heavy, stained black. And Connell understood. The gift he brought home had come too late. And that Christmas night, there was no miracle. Mama Funk passed away at the hospital in the early hours of the next morning. There was no bell, no miracle. Only a cold, unbroken line stretching across the heart monitor, and a nurse lowering her head, gently placing a hand on Connell's shoulder. "Your mother is gone." The words fell like a heavy stone. They made no sound, yet they collapsed everything inside him. Connell stood still, eyes wide open, seeing nothing. He waited for one more breath, waited for the smallest movement in his mother's chest. But Mama Funk lay there, quiet, as if she had grown very tired, and was finally allowed to rest. She left without hearing her son call her mom one last time. No final words, no last hand to hold. Only a long silence. The same silence Connell had lived with for so long, and the very silence that had killed his mother. In the hallway, the sharp smell of disinfectant clung to the air. Connell sank onto a plastic chair, his trembling hands clasped together. His clothes were still stained with mud from the rainy night. Under his fingernails, the dirt remained, as if guilt had settled in too deep to be washed away. The police arrived not long after. They asked questions, they took notes. They looked at Connell with eyes mixed with pity and caution, the look reserved for those who arrived too late. Saad was arrested that same morning. She sat upright, her hands cuffed in front of her chest. Her hair had dried. Her face looked strangely clean, as if the night of rain had never happened. She did not cry. She did not beg. She did not turn back to look for Connell. She stared straight ahead, her eyes empty, like the room inside her heart, where regret had never been allowed to live. As the police car pulled away, Connell stood by the roadside. He thought he would scream, call his wife's name, ask why, but his throat froze. Once again, he chose silence. And once again, silence won. The funeral was simple, just like Mama Funk's life. A plain wooden coffin, a few small wreaths. Neighbors from the old market came quietly, standing at the back. They whispered about a woman who sold a kara her entire life, who raised her son with sweat and patience, who endured more than any person ever should. Connell stood before the coffin for a long time. Inside his pocket was the wool scarf, the gift he meant to give his mother on Christmas night. He took it out and gripped it tightly. The scarf was soft, warm, clean, too clean compared to the mud that covered his mother's hair the night before. A gift that arrived too late. A love delayed until there was no one left to receive it. Connell knelt down. His knees pressed against the cold floor. His hands trembled as he placed the scarf on the coffin, as if his mother could still feel it. He bowed his head, his voice breaking into a whisper. I chose silence. And silence killed my mother. No one answered. In the distance, Christmas hymns drifted from a church far away. Songs about hope, about redemption, about light entering the darkness. But to Connell, those melodies came from another world, a world he had lost the right to enter. He stood up slowly, like a man who had aged 10 years in a single night. When the coffin was closed, Connell did not cry. The tears were gone, frozen somewhere deep inside his chest. Then he understood too late. Some sins do not require a hand to commit them. All it takes is looking away, remaining silent, being more afraid of judgment than of the truth. That night, Connell left the hospital alone. No mother waiting in the shed behind the house. No one calling him to come eat. No warmth from a woman who had given him her entire life. Only emptiness. Outside, the rain had stopped. But inside Connell, winter had become permanent. Mama Funk was buried beside the land she once sold. It was a small plot on the edge of a badan, where grass grew wild, where a red dirt road cut across the land like an old scar from years of poverty. No one ever called that place beautiful. But to Mama Funk, it had once been her final hope, the land her husband left behind, the land she held onto like a promise for old age, until she finally sold it to pay for Connell's wedding. And in bitter irony, the very place she sacrificed so her son could start life with dignity became her resting place. On the day of the burial, it did not rain. Yet the air was cold, as if rain had settled inside everyone's heart. Neighbors from the old market came in large numbers, people who had bought a kara from her, who had once owed her a few coins, who had watched her walk through the years with a basin on her head, never complaining. They stood in a long, quiet circle. No one spoke loudly, as if even the smallest sound might shatter the grief Connell was holding inside. Connell stepped closer to the grave while the soil was still fresh, still red, still damp with the scent of endings. He looked at the newly filled ground, at the simple flowers resting on top, then at the brown wool scarf still tucked in his pocket, the gift he bought for his mother on Christmas night, a gift that would never be given. He wanted to say something to her, just one sentence, but it wouldn't come out. His throat tightened, blocked like it was filled with mud, just like the night he pulled his mother from the mire. He stood there frozen, feeling as though he too was being pushed under, except this time, there was no one left to pull him out. When the headstone was placed, the words carved into the stone were painfully simple. A mother who gave everything, and kept nothing for herself. Kuno read it again and again. Each time, an invisible rope tightened around his chest, because he knew that giving everything was not just selling land, not just waking early and sleeping late, not just the calluses on her hands. Giving everything also meant quietly stepping out of her own home so her son would not feel ashamed. It meant lying on a damp mat in a shed behind the house without a word of blame. It meant silence, a mother's kind of silence, the kind meant to protect a child. And then, that silence meant another silence, Kuno's silence. The silence of a man who did not have the courage to stand beside the woman who gave him life. After the funeral, Kuno returned to the house one last time. Everything was still there. The rusted gate, the cracked dirt road, the small shed in the back. But it was no longer a home. It felt like an empty shell, a place where all warmth had been taken away. He stepped into the shed. The mat was still there, thin, worn, frayed at the edges. A plastic bowl sat in the corner. The old cloth his mother used to wipe her hands. Those small objects suddenly felt larger than any mansion, because they were the final traces of a life that had been treated as a burden. Kuno sat on the dirt floor and closed his eyes. He heard his mother's voice again. "As long as I'm breathing, I'll take care of you." He heard the rain. He heard her weak whisper, "Kuno, I'm so cold." And for the first time, he understood something clearly. Some deaths do not begin in the final moment. They begin on the days we choose to look away. The next morning, Kuno left Ibadan. Not to escape the law. Saad had been arrested, witnesses had spoken, records had been filed. He left because every alley, every tin roof, every corner of the market reminded him of his mother. Ibadan had become a giant mirror, reflecting his cowardice, and he no longer had the strength to look. He carried the wool scarf with him. He carried the memory of her calloused hands. He carried the words on the headstone like a scar etched into his heart. And he carried one final lesson, soaked in tears, a lesson he should have learned before it was too late. Silence in the face of evil is also a form of betrayal. Before you were a husband, before you became successful, remember this: you were once the child of a mother. If this story touched your heart, pause for a moment and think of the woman who sacrificed her entire life for you. Subscribe to Afritalis at TK to continue walking with stories that awaken conscience and humanity. Where in the world are you watching Afritalis at TK from?